in Charlottesville, and of course in Wisconsin doing the same, basically.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joe and Mika. So what we saw in Wisconsin was all too familiar from what happened in Charlottesville. And one of the reasons that I want to speak out about this is because the rise in anti-Semitism that we're seeing in the United States today is not just a problem for Jewish people, it's a problem for all people. In Charlottesville, what started with Jews will not replace us quickly became violence directed towards all races and ethnicities, killing one woman and grievously injuring others. And what we learned, immersed in the evidence for 5 years of what led to Charlottesville, was that it was planned and it was premeditated, and that anti-Semitism was very much used tactically to rally people to the cause and to racial hatred in general. And so part of the tactics that we're seeing is normalization. So the first time you see 20 people march with swastika flags and masks in a college town in Madison, Wisconsin, maybe you're shocked. But how do you feel the second time or the third time? And how do you feel when it's 100 people? The idea is to normalize this, to make it seem less shocking so that becomes more acceptable.
Karen Al Sharpton, talk about how in the middle of our dealing with the war of Israel and Hamas, that some of these neo-Nazi groups are infiltrating some of the people that are outraged about what's going on in the Gaza and turning what could be a balanced concern for those that suffered in Israel as civilians and those that suffered in Gaza as civilians as really a front for them to get their anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish message out. Because there are some people that legitimately are for a two-state solution like I am, but that are outraged on what happened in Israel and outraged what happened in Gaza that are not anywhere near some anti-Semitic or neo-Nazis. Talk about how these neo-Nazi groups are in fact infiltrating and manipulating some of these protests and turning them into something they were not originally designed for.
Yeah, well, the reaction among the white supremacist community to October 7th was swift, and it was gleeful. And they are seeing an opportunity here because they are looking to push the same anti-Semitic tropes that they've been pushing for years. So the National Justice Party attended a rally at the White House, and they, put on their website and had signs calling for the destruction of Israel, which is not a feeling shared by many of those people protesting at the White House. And so we have to be very careful in what we're seeing. We see, they see an opportunity where other people see a massacre or a horrible set of circumstances.
Karen, first, let me say how happy I always am to see a successful woman trial lawyer. It is harder than it looks, so good for you. My question to you is, what would your advice be to people on the ground that are peacefully trying to protest and find themselves invaded by all this hate and this ugliness? How do they preserve their rights to protest without being associated with this kind of ugly, and what should they do in the moment to try to not allow this to be normalized?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. I appreciate the compliment very much. On the ground is very difficult, but I think the most important thing is to be aware. And one thing that we've seen is that people who do not like the white supremacist message and they are concerned about extremist violence are taking it on in the moment and are saying, we don't agree with this. It's very important, the right to speech, the right to protest, all protected under our Constitution, but the right to extremist violence is not. And so if you see people in your midst who you think are trying to exploit the situation for their own purposes, not out of any concern that you share, you should speak up, you should say something, and you should disassociate from their message, because we have all seen through Charlottesville and other extremist events in the United States, what this leads to. And it's not good for anyone. It's not good for the Jewish people, and it's not good for any people.
My God. Attorney Karen Dunn, thank you very much for coming on the show, for writing your piece, which is why neo-Nazi groups are popping up at pro-Palestinian rallies. It's online now at msnbc.com. And